I've used astrology for hundreds of different students when it comes to choosing the right career path and just finding the right career path through the natal chart and using it as a guide in which we can get access to a spectrum of different careers. And this is one of the things that happens when looking at your natal chart. Oftentimes you don't get the specific answer that you're looking for. Instead, you get a range of possibilities. Now, for those people out there that are trying to choose their career path, that range of possibilities might be fucking annoying because you just want to know what the answer is. But essentially, astrology gives you access to the spectrum or to the range of possibilities that you can get access to. And so in this video, I want to talk a little bit about what that looks like and how that works and some of the problems that I've run up against with other students in choosing their own career path. And by the way, if you don't know me, my name is Uili. I am an occult philosopher. I am sort of into all the wrong forms of knowledge, mysticism, esotericism, magic, theurgy, alchemy. And in looking into people's career paths using this sort of spiritual warehouse of ideas, I have been able to help people to unearth their own career archetypes so they can choose the right career path and move forward with their life and get some traction on what it is that they're born to do and get walking their soul-led career. And I think that this video will really give you a different way and approach of working with your natal chart if you have already, or if you haven't ever looked at places like your 10th house, this area or domain of career paths in your natal chart. You can begin to get an understanding of how this can impact your own personal life and your own personal trajectory. So the first thing I want to say is that we have to think about the 10th house. So what is the 10th house? When you look at your natal chart, it's broken into 12 different categories. These 12 different sections in the circle are known as houses. Each house signifies a different area of life. And you can think about these different areas of life as different environments or different ecosystems where different expressions of your own life are represented in the world. And so when we look at a chart, we can see that, okay, this first house, this is all about the self, me, my identity, who I am. Oh, the 7th house, this is all about relationships. You're probably going to find other people. It's literally someone else on the other side. And you can see that within your own natal chart. And yet when it comes to your career, the first place you want to look is the 10th house. The 10th house is the place, and I use my hands like this because in your chart, it's at the top. And that number 10, you can typically see it on most natal charts, is where your career, your reputation, this environment of reputation and career exists, your profession. So in knowing that and thinking about your own 10th house, it means that you're not necessarily going to have a career path that's related to your sun sign. You're not necessarily going to have a career path that's related to your moon sign. You're not necessarily going to have a career path that's related to your Venus placement or your Mars placement. Even if, let's say, for example, you have Mars in Capricorn, even if you've read some things online that say that because you have Mars in Capricorn, you're probably very driven in your profession. There might be some of that in there because of the different ways in which your chart is constructed. And I'm simplifying for the sake of explaining what the 10th house is all about. However, the 10th house is where the action happens when it comes to your career path. In order to understand how astrology views your profession, you have to look there first. And one way to begin looking at this place is to look at the sign that resides over your 10th house. So if you look at your own natal chart, look for the 10th house. And by the way, when I talk about this, I'm using whole sign houses. And so if you want to look at this in your own chart, what you do is you look at your chart and you look for the 10th house and you look for the sign that resides over the top of that 10th house. And I do use the whole sign system. So if you are somebody that uses a different system in your own natal chart, like the Placidus and whatnot, it's going to be a little bit different. I'm not going to get into the how to view it. However, when it comes to whole signs, it's basically the sign that is over the top because there's no other signs that interfere with that house. So once you have the sign that resides over your 10th house, you can start to get a little bit of a feel for the kind of direction, invocation that somebody is going to pursue. Remember, again, we're not trying to nail the answer. We're trying to get a range of exactly what it is that this 10th house is requiring you to express in the world. So let's say, for example, you had the sign of Scorpio over the top of your 10th house. there's some particular types of expressions that a Scorpio 10th house is going to have. And I'm not getting into rulership, I'm not getting into different aspects or planets within inside the 10th house, just thinking about the sign itself over that 10th house. If we start thinking about some of these different colorings of Scorpio, one thing I've noticed with working with people with Scorpio in the 10th house is that no matter what profession they're going to be pursuing, they are going to be going deep on that. I mean, this is not, I'm going to be going sort of superficial on it, I'm not going to be barely touching it, or I'm going to sort of look at it from multiple angles. It's like we are going to the very fucking depths of this thing. And when we get to the depths of this thing, only then will we be satisfied. And of course, when it comes to your profession, when it comes to mastery, you're never going to get to the depths of that thing. So there is this penetrating or digging quality. If we think about this in the world, this could look like somebody that pursues psychology and thinking, you know what the best psychology that I want to pursue is? It's like depth psychology. We're going to dig and dig and dig in the psyche and then dig some more and then keep on going until we reach the ground. And so this is the kind of energy that the vocation is going to have. Another example might be something like archaeology and digging the literal physical earth in order to find different things underneath. And this is another example of an expression that a Scorpio 10th house might have. Now, there are going to be a lot of other different types of components, but you can get a type of feel by understanding simply what the sign is trying to do. And one of the things that Scorpio tries to do is it tries to penetrate to the depths of something because it likes to get into union with things. And it gets into union with things or merges with things by getting to or getting beyond the superficial. It's like, I don't want to see the fake front. I want to get behind the mask. I want to see the core, the real, everything inside and some. And so it always gets to see the dirty. It always gets to see underneath the clean and pristine. Now, knowing that your 10th house sign has some sort of expression of your career, you can already go and start looking at different explanations of the sign itself in order to say, okay, what is this sign up to and what is it attempting to do? So to do another one, if we think about Sagittarius, this is a very different type of expression. I mean, archetypally very different from Scorpio. Sagittarius isn't going to go to the depths of things. It is going to go far and wide, and it is going to go upwards. It's very upward lifting, whereas Scorpio is very downward going. And so somebody that has a Sagittarius 10th house might naturally find themselves wanting to expand beyond the current limitations of whatever it is that they're in. If they were to, say, be studying in a university, they would want to be going beyond the material, beyond the confines of the walls that they are given. And so that might look like them being a little bit controversial. And then maybe they want to push their opinion as the opinion because that's a very Sagittarius 10th house thing to do. And once again, it matters about all the other placements and whatnot, but just getting an understanding of what sign is residing over your 10th house is going to give you a bit of flavoring as to the pursuit that you are naturally going to feel as though this is kind of the right space for me. This is kind of the right lane. And so in saying that, I did want to mention just a few problems that I've noticed in looking at people's natal charts in relation to their 10th house. The first one that I want to mention is that your 10th house is not your sun sign. And this is really, really important because oftentimes people will closely associate with their sun. I mean, it makes sense. This is you, your spirit, trying to come out and shine light into the world. It is literally your intention on the world. And so you have an intention that you want to express in the world. And when it doesn't match your 10th house, there can be this conflict going on. Say, for example, you have a Scorpio 10th house, but then your sun sign is Gemini, and Gemini wants to go and talk about all the ideas, spread the ideas, travel around, and just be there for a couple of seconds. And then that 10th house in Scorpio wants to stay, wants to go deep, and also doesn't really want anybody to know what it's up to. And so you have this contradiction. On one side, the sun wants to be seen as this thing, but the 10th house is saying, no, the work that we're doing isn't similar to that. In fact, in order for these two things to relate to each other, they have to reconcile their differences. They have to find almost this working partnership to get going. And I've noticed when people have a sun sign that is very, very different from their 10th house sign, or there's no easy relationship there and there's no sort of aspect that's helping out or no other planet that's helping out, there can be a conflict. And that conflict can cause somebody sometimes to choose which one they're going to go with. And this is where you get some people where they'll just choose, hey, I just want to express my identity, and their career is going to shit. Or where you get somebody that is super, super career driven and they're going really, really well in their career, but they have no sense of self. They've sort of lost themselves in the process of the pursuit of some sort of vocation. The other thing that's super interesting just about the way that the natal chart is constructed is that the 10th house and the second house aren't the same house. Now, the second house is related to money. It's related to resources on a deeper level. It's related to values. And what I mean by that is your psychological values. What do you value? You can see what you value by what you purchase in your bank account, which is a nice way to link the two. But your second house is money, your money. How do you bring in money into this world? How do you get money in this world? And for these two things not to be related to each other, you start to question, why isn't the second house the same house as the 10th house? I mean, in this world, we work, we get income from our work. These two things seem to be incredibly related. And in a way they are, because everything in the natal chart is related to each other. I mean, all 12 houses are a house as a part of one whole. And yet the 10th house and the second house are two different houses. So in thinking about that, what you realize is that your vocation and your profession doesn't directly impact the amount of money that you're going to bring in. And yet, when you look out in the world and you look on the news, the way that things are expressed to you or explained to you is that the profession that you do equals the amount of income that you get. And so in astrology, that is actually broken up. And it's like, no, that's actually not true. Your vocation and your career path might be one direction, and the way in which you bring money in might be a different direction. And so when we are walking a path that is deeply fulfilling but also brings us an income, it often requires us to figure out, how does the 10th house relate to the second house, if at all? And if it doesn't relate, what can we do about it? And do we need to do something about it? If it does relate, how does it relate? And in what ways does it relate? And so what I definitely recommend doing is looking at your 10th house, looking at the ruler of your 10th house, which is the planet that rules over that sign, meaning that if you had Scorpio over the 10th house, then you'd be looking for Mars. If you had Sagittarius over the 10th house, then you'd be looking for Jupiter, and you'd look to see if there's any connection with the second house. Now, the other problem that I notice when it comes to the 10th house is the problem of many different possibilities. So if you've gone down the rabbit hole of your natal chart and of your 10th house and of the sign of your 10th house, of some of the planets in your 10th house, of the ruler of your 10th house, you would notice that a lot of people will say, oh, okay, so you've got the moon in your 10th. Maybe you are very nurturing, so you could be a nurse. And you'll start to get this list of different professions that you could be in based on your 10th house. And this is actually really, really fucking great information. The problem is that it typically doesn't give you the answer. And I've also found, at least many students have come to me and said that even when they're working with astrologers, the astrologers can't give them an exact answer. They can just give them some sort of guidance or some sort of pointing in a direction. And so what you're going to want to do is to, rather than try to decide from that list, try to understand what that list is trying to tell you. Try to get a feeling for it. Try to look at the similarities between the different things. Try to get an understanding of the traits that these different professions hold within them. And that's going to give you a better picture of the direction of your vocation, rather than trying to look at that list and try to pick one. Because one of the limits I find with the natal chart, which is the spectrum doesn't give the thing. Now, I suspect that there are astrologers out there who can give you the exact thing, but I mean, even one of the best astrologers by the name of Robert Hand said that many people that he did consultations for, he realized that their life theme and where they're meant to be going in this world wasn't actually about the career. So the best he could do was give them a possibility within a range of possibilities and to tell them to focus on a different area of life because that's what their life was about. So I suspect that there might be people out there that can give you a specific answer. I haven't found them. I can't do it with a natal chart. When I look at it, I use different modalities and different forms and ways of approaching the exact thing. But astrology definitely gives you a spectrum in which you can find the walls or the outside areas through which, hey, if you go and pick a career over here, it's definitely outside of what it is that you're meant to be doing with your life. So I say all that to say that you really just want to understand your 10th house sign. I mean, nothing deeper than that. Just go and look at your 10th house sign, get a feel for it, get an understanding of it. And by doing that, you'll get a basic direction of where the career is meant to go towards.